I guess I'll introduce myself. My name is Dong Yi. I use they or any pronouns. I am the current program director at Quail Springs. And I will pass the mic to Yenny, who is supporting us with chat and background support today.
This is hard. He lives here. Hi, everyone. I'm here to help organize any questions, answer any questions that perhaps I can answer versus Dong Yi. And thank you all for being here. And I'm really excited for this conversation. Yeah.
And before I introduce all the guests today, just a little bit about Quail Springs if you're not already familiar. Quail Springs is an educational nonprofit that sits on 450 acres permaculture demonstration site on the traditional homelands of the Chumash people in Ojai Valley in California. Our mission is to empower students of all ages and backgrounds of knowledge, skills, and inspiration essential to cultivating ecological and social health. So that's a little bit about Quail Springs, and we're so honored to have our Quail Springs extended community members, Abudu, Diego, and Jeffrey, here today to speak to how their respective cultural backgrounds inform the way they practice permaculture. So I will pass it to, let's see, Diego first, just to say hi.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Diego Cordero. I'm a native plant practitioner. I'm Chumash from Santa Barbara. I work currently for the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash in the Santa Ynez Chumash Environmental Office. It was good to be here with all of you. Maybe pop it over to Jeffrey.
Well, thanks, Diego. Yeah, my name is Jeffrey Reidl. I'm agroecological systems designer and consultant and a permaculture teacher, farm manager here in Upper Ojai, Chumash territory, and I have an ethnoecological background as well, and I've been working a lot in so-called international development work with smallholder farmers and nonprofit organizations. Yeah, we'll hear more about what I do. Maybe pass on to Abudu.
Greetings, everyone. Happy rising to you, wherever you're coming from, or good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Abudu, or Awudu, either one is fine. I work and live also at the same land with Jeff in Upper Ojai, and I also help run a project here in the Tovangar, the LA Basin, called Akwaaba. It's a Akwaaba Food Forest project. I've been working I had this reawakening to work and tend earth maybe 6 years ago, and left my artistic background to study traditional ecological knowledge, plants, horticulture, ecology, natural systems. Went up to Northern California to study permaculture design with Brock Dolman and Kendall Dunn at Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, and that kind of really spurred my journey. And since then, been working with fruit trees, native plants, medicinal, climate appropriate gardens in the Tovangar, the LA Basin, and around, Southern California. It's good to be here today and looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abudu, Diego, and Jeffrey. I have my camera turned off because Quail Springs is off-grid and our internet connection can be a little funky sometimes. I'm gonna go ahead and start our slideshow so that each speaker can kind of give you a little background into, yeah, their work. Can folks see the slideshow? Great. Okay. Should have put the slideshow on a little earlier. Here it is again. All three people. And so let's start with Abudu, if you want to talk a little about your what you've been doing. And feel free to type in where you're coming from and yeah, your name in the chat. Welcome, Lauren from Evanston, Illinois, and Mark from Newberry Park. Shelly from Davenport, Washington. Jeannie from Monterey. Ty Lees from Montreal. Reina from Three Rivers. Hi, Reina. Lucy from Boston. Okay, just submitting a little bit more people in. I guess I'll introduce myself. My name is Dong Yi. I use they or any pronouns. I am the current program director at Quail Springs. And I will pass the mic to Yenny, who is supporting us with chat and background support today.
This is hard. He lives here. Hi, everyone. I'm here to help organize any questions, answer any questions that perhaps I can answer versus Dong Yi. And thank you all for being here. And I'm really excited for this conversation. Yeah.
And before I introduce all the guests today, just a little bit about Quail Springs if you're not already familiar. Quail Springs is an educational nonprofit that sits on 450 acres permaculture demonstration site on the traditional homelands of the Chumash people in Ojai Valley in California. Our mission is to empower students of all ages and backgrounds of knowledge, skills, and inspiration essential to cultivating ecological and social health. So that's a little bit about Quail Springs, and we're so honored to have our Quail Springs extended community members, Abudu, Diego, and Jeffrey, here today to speak to how their respective cultural backgrounds inform the way they practice permaculture. So I will pass it to, let's see, Diego first, just to say hi.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Diego Cordero. I'm a native plant practitioner. I'm Chumash from Santa Barbara. I work currently for the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash in the Santa Ynez Chumash Environmental Office. It was good to be here with all of you. Maybe pop it over to Jeffrey.
Well, thanks, Diego. Yeah, my name is Jeffrey Reidl. I'm agroecological systems designer and consultant and a permaculture teacher, farm manager here in Upper Ojai, Chumash territory, and I have an ethnoecological background as well, and I've been working a lot in so-called international development work with smallholder farmers and nonprofit organizations. Yeah, you'll hear more about what I do. Maybe pass on to Abudu.
Greetings, everyone. Happy rising to you, wherever you're coming from, or good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Abudu, or Awudu, either one is fine. I work and live also at the same land with Jeff in Upper Ojai. And I also help run a project here in the Tovangar, the LA Basin, called Akwaaba. It's a Akwaaba Food Forest project. I've been working I had this reawakening to work and tend earth maybe 6 years ago, and left my artistic background to study traditional ecological knowledge, plants, horticulture, ecology, natural systems. Went up to Northern California to study permaculture design with Brock Dolman and Kendall Dunn at Occidental Arts and Ecology Center. And that kind of really spurred my journey. And since then, been working with fruit trees, native plants, medicinal, climate appropriate gardens in the Tovangar, the LA Basin, and around, Southern California. It's good to be here today and looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abudu, Diego, and Jeffrey. I have my camera turned off because Quail Springs is off-grid and our internet connection can be a little funky sometimes. I'm gonna go ahead and start our slideshow so that each speaker can kind of give you a little background into, their work. And let's see. Hold on. Can folks see the slideshow? Great. Okay. Should have put the slideshow on a little earlier. Here it is again. All three people. And so let's start with Abudu, if you want to talk a little about your what you've been doing. Abudu, I think you're muted.
Oh, man, I'm sorry. All right, bye. Hello? You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm sorry about that. I'm accidentally signed in on my partner's account, and she's also trying to do a Zoom right now. And so one of us, I think she's getting off. I'm not sure. So sorry about that. Hopefully it doesn't kick me off. I'll just try to proceed here. So this is Akwaaba. I believe I'm supposed to be talking about this. The photos are being shown here. So Akwaaba Food Forest Project is a project here in Pasadena that we started 2 years ago in spring. So it was a 10-week course where we brought different teachers from the community to teach about how to create a food forest, a backyard food forest, small scale, that integrates, all the layers, right? The 7 or 10 layers of life that can live harmoniously together and support each other in an ecologically sound way, balanced way. So each week we had a different teacher come and teach about a certain layer of the food forest. So the first week was about actually native plants. And that was our way of honoring the first plants that were here before us. So we planted a native plant garden, and we had, some stories and some knowledge shared with us about these traditional plants to these lands. The second week was all about soil and soil biology, fungi, all that good stuff. The third week was about ground covers. 4th week was about like herbaceous plants, for example. 5th week, probably about like fruit trees, pruning, overstory, coppicing, things like this. And then we also, learned about vines and brambles, and polycultures, right? And then we also had a week where we just focused on installing irrigation, all about drip irrigation. So this was a very we tried to make it, a full circle experience. Each week consisted of about an hour of talk, and then followed by like 3 hours of work, tending and constructing the garden. There were some big burned cypress trees in this photo to the lower left against that brick wall that we brought down with the chainsaw and pulled down. Excuse me. We cut them up and used them for borders, for edging, for our garden beds, and brought a lot of mulch in. That was the first thing we did, like 6 inches of solid mulch, to create kind of that fungal dominant soil and suppress the grass that was kind of growing there. You can move on to the next slide. We have, so this is the updated photo of how the garden's been looking the last 2 springs and summers here in fall. We've been growing an abundance of edible medicinal plants and sharing with community freely. So every weekend, or between 2 and 4 times a month, we get together on Saturday or Sunday and tend the garden as a community. Anyone's welcome, and people are just sharing their knowledge of the plants that they have relationships with, and it's just cultivating and growing this beauty together, rekindling that ancestral relationship, and healing that kind of disconnection. And a lot of this food also is shared through Rhythms of the Village, which is the African shop and boutique in Altadena. Baba Onoche and his son Emeka founded that shop, and this is their backyard. And they have what's called Fresh Fruit Saturday, where once at the end of every month, they share fresh fruits and vegetables from their shop. And we wanted to try to create a space where we could grow a lot of that food that we're then sharing with community directly from the shop. And so people who come, they help tend the garden, they share their time and energy, and in response, in circulation, they're of course able to harvest and take plants home to nourish them. We hope to have more workshops and events there in that space. We're definitely open for collaboration, and we hope to that this land will keep providing those lessons and blessings and education for people.
Thank you so much, Abudu. So great to hear about the project in Pasadena, Akwaaba. Let's move on to, let's see, Diego.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I want to make a couple of apologies. My neighbor got a new dog, so you may hear her in the background. She's a sweet dog, but today she's feeling very talkative. So she may contribute to this conversation as well. And I also want to apologize. Some of these photos are kind of out of order. I was kind of playing with it, and I'm also not very good at taking photos of what I'm doing. So some of it is not stuff I am doing, but I'll speak to them a little bit. So as I said, I'm a native plant practitioner. I'm an advocate of traditional ecological knowledge or traditional ecological practices, and coming from the Chumash culture, that's what I'm familiar with. So that tends to be what I'm advocating. The question was kind of asked of me, like, what is permaculture? And I really think that permaculture at its strongest is about recognizing the patterns and the ways of nature and integrating our practices into that, right? So that instead of trying to brute force nature to adapt to us, and make it the way that we want it to be, we're working with those patterns in order for a mutually beneficial relationship. And that's a lot of what our traditional practices are. So the first picture I have up there is of Yosemite Valley. I really like this story because, you know, most people know the story of Yosemite Valley here in California. It's not Chumash territory, but, you know, John Muir and Theodore Roosevelt show up there and they see this really wonderful wilderness, right, that they think is this untouched natural landscape. And what they didn't realize is that Yosemite Valley was a giant garden, pretty much, that was being managed by the people there, you know, for hundreds of years, thousands of years, perhaps. And I like, you know, and the reason that it was so abundant with, you know, life was because of these practices that people had been putting in, had been utilizing there. And that's a big part of what I'm trying to do is the practices, the traditional practices that we put in, actually the thing I like to say is we through our harvest we create abundance. There's a saying a lot of Native people, you'll hear a lot of Native people say, which is, you know, the people need the plants, but the plant needs the people too. So the second image you see here is actually I went out harvesting dogbane, which is a traditional fiber plant for us for making cordage. And that's a plant that actually really benefits being harvested from. Most of our food crops and our medicine and, you know, the things that we're using, people don't realize that this landscape is naturally very abundant, but it's through our interventions that we actually make it more abundant. So this is jumping a little ahead, but that third picture is not actually of me or my work. It's a gentleman I met, and his name is Michael Kotutwa Johnson. He is Hopi. He goes by Dr. Hopi Farmer, if you want to give him a look up. And the reason I include this is because he does a traditional Hopi dryland farming. And I think it's an interesting thing because, as I was saying, with permaculture integrating us into the landscape or into the natural cycles, you know, he's got something that's been going on for hundreds of years and can keep going on for hundreds of years with, you know, obviously it's hard work, but, you know, he doesn't have drip line out there. He's not importing a bunch of inputs. He's just harvesting from his land, and he knows how to work with it. And I think it's interesting for a lot of people too, because, you know, you'll notice he's got a bunch of bare ground. He's doing a bunch of stuff that a lot of times when you're learning permaculture is kind of, oh, you want to cover that up, you want to do stuff, but he understands in his particular place what works for him. And I think that's a big part of traditional ecological knowledge. If we could hop to the next slide. So a large part of it, what we do here that I think is something that maybe people could learn from, you know, it works in our landscape here in California. In the bottom right, you'll see this is a project I was actually on where we were burning out actually by, well, it used to be part of Halama Ranch, and we're actually burning the chaparral there. And we are looking at what, you know, this is a collaborative project, and we had a whole bunch of people, including the environmental office, doing these prescribed burns. They're not totally cultural burns, but they're prescribed burns that are similar to that. And we're burning the chaparral there. And the reason is because what are we promoting when we burn, right? There's a lot of our native crops that will emerge when we've cleared out the land through burning, that we're actually promoting those. And so we wanted to see what would happen in this place where chaparral had come down, that maybe would be better as a grassland. We're incorporating that. But that's a good burn. That's something that we're doing with thought and intention, and, you know, we're trying to reintroduce fire to the landscape in a good way. That's not always the case. Up in the top left, what you see there is the saguaros burning in Arizona. They're not adapted to fire ecology like we are here in California. And what that is that's because a grass was introduced out there called buffalo grass, I want to say. and it's a great ground cover, but now you've created a situation where there's connections where fires normally couldn't spread. Now they spread and they burn the cactuses, which take a really long time to grow. So there's good fire and there's bad fire, and a lot of it's about being responsible. Can we go to the next slide? And so on the left there, you actually see that area was burned last fall, and that's why you got all those poppies and wildflowers and all that, is that we've converted it from chaparral to grassland. And on the right there is our chia, we call it elep, which is one of our staple crops. It's just what I'm really trying to and then what I'm trying to say is this is a crop. These practices are, we're looking at things that are climate appropriate, ways to feed people and take care of people and provide people what they need that work here and will continue to work. And I think that's really one of the things that, introducing that traditional ecological knowledge into permaculture practices can really be a mutually beneficial relationship. And that's what we are trying to establish, is a mutually beneficial relationship between us and the plants. That's really what I work with, is plants. There's people who do animals and things like that, but I work with the native plants, and we can, there's a few other crops I can speak of, in the future, that when we harvest them, we get more. We're actually helping them in their reproductive cycle. So we end up, over time, the more we harvest, having more of those plants, which seems counterintuitive, but it actually is. When you do things in a responsible way, all of this is about doing things in a responsible way. You do it in a responsible way, it's actually a totally mutually beneficial relationship. And thank you. I can speak more of that later when we have some Q&A.
Thank you so much for for this sharing of knowledge and information, Diego. And then Jeffrey, can you share a little bit more about what you're working on?
Yeah, thank you, Diego. And Abudu, if you have things to add, please just jump in also. We manage an orchard that it used to be a conventional orchard, classic California citrus orchard, dependent on chemical fertilizers, depending on high amounts of water. And so when we got involved, it was just clear this tropical tree that we do not want to continue, and we slowly want to phase out this tropical tree, which is in this valley and in these areas, a political action, because it's such a big major crop for so many areas in California. But just from our perspective, given a more holistic agroecological approach, we just want to phase certain things out.
Yeah, so I'd like to open the conversation up for the three of you, a discussion, and as Diego already kind of started talking about, just a question of like, what does permaculture mean to you, and what is exciting about permaculture to you, and also other thoughts and feedback you have around, what permaculture is and how you practice and your relation to permaculture. I'll let Diego start.
All right. Well, as I said, I think a lot of it has to do with, being aware of the natural patterns, right? Permaculture is a set of practices and principles, right? And I think it really is at its best when there's that integration with those natural principles, and the practices follow that. I think the potential with it is really that it's a way in the kind of society that we live in right now, the way that we do things, I think it works really great when everything is, everything's running perfectly, right? But those of us who are trying to think intergenerationally, right? We're trying to think, okay, what happens, in 50 years, in 100 years? What are we leaving for our children? What happens if everything isn't great? In the past few years, we've seen situations where the supply chains have broken down, or there's been some disruption to society. Well, if we have practices that aren't as reliant on everything just going just so on in those supply chains, we've built in resiliency into our ability to take care of each other. And the more that we're able to teach these principles and these practices, and the more places we have that are implementing those, the stronger we are. We've woven together a much stronger society. So I think that's really where what excites me about permaculture is that when you're learning these things, you're strengthening, both your own, capability, but also you're strengthening, your community, your town, whatever you want to say, your people, whatever you want to say. You've created something that can last, and that can adapt to a changing world.
Thank you. And yeah, Jeffrey and Abudu, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think permaculture is a really useful tool and a toolbox and framework for people to regain a deeper and more reciprocal relationship with the ecosystem that they live in and with the natural world. And it's one of many toolboxes, one of many frameworks, but I think it's a really useful one, especially maybe for Europeans and Europeans Americans, because there's such a clear, it's so difficult. Well, traditional ecological knowledge is lost very quickly. It's lost in heartbeat. I mean, even a minor civil unrest or even a minor economic downturn is enough for a lot of young people to leave and a lot of older people to die, where knowledge is gone in a generation, and it takes multiple generations to regain. And the further each generation is alienated or disconnected from traditional ecological knowledge and practices that are pertinent to their specific bioregion, the harder it will be for the next generation to regain that back. And so especially for a European context where I'm from, in the Alpine region, I know that most arable land has already been completely deforested by 1,000 years BC. That's over 3,000 years ago, where natural forests just aren't part of the culture anymore. And tending forest ecosystems aren't part of the culture anymore. And that was pre-Rome. That was pre-Roman Empire. And so I think it has had such detrimental effects, not just ecologically, because there's no more resource base in Europe, not for hundreds of years, but also just human health wise, and the effects it had on the rest of the world, how Europeans spread out to fill their lack of resources, around the world. And so permaculture is a really useful tool for that, I think, to reclaim and regain a deeper relationship and responsibility and accountability to the ecosystem that you inhabit. I think that's a really important step. And yeah, okay. Yeah, that's it for now, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't say that better. That was very well said, and I agree, with what's been shared. So I'll just keep my answer short and say, I appreciate how the permaculture ethics and principles can work as guidelines and be applied to all aspects of life and human interaction, from construction to human habitation, agriculture, technology, and even economics, right? And also these invisible structures in our social spheres, as well as physical structures.
Thank you. Let's could ask a question around for all three of you. Hmm. Yeah, what are some land tending practices in your respective cultures that aren't called by any particular name, but you see applied in permaculture? And I know Diego kind of spoke to that, some of that. But yeah, just like any additional, yeah, thoughts or shares you want to offer.
I'll start. Yeah, thank you. So my biological father is from Ghana, West Africa, and he's of the Ashanti people. And he came to Europe and then to, Turtle Island when he was in his 30s. And he heavily assimilated and he changed his name. I've never heard him speak a word of his native language. He was also absent from a lot of my life. I reconnected with him when I was about 13. And I hadn't seen him since I was 2 years old prior to that. So that is to say, I'm quite disconnected and removed from that culture, and I have not visited Ghana yet. So my answer to this question would be, I hope to be able to have an answer to this question in a couple of years after I've been able to visit. And yeah, I'll keep it short.
Jeffrey, you wanna, or Diego?
Jeffrey, you got something prepared?
You go ahead.
All right. Well, I think this is a little more, abstract than a concrete practice, but the principles that you hear, in permaculture being, like earth care, people care, fair share. I think that ethic of reciprocity being applied to both, interpersonal relationships, but also the way that you are, interacting with the land that you're on. I think that that's, very similar to our approach to it, right? You really want to be contributing, right? I mean, you don't just want to be taking from the land. It's when you're caretaking the land, you are giving something back. It's a relationship. We talk a lot about relationships, including with the plants, with the animals. That relationship and establishing that relationship is really important in both permaculture and in traditional Chumash culture. And I think when I took my PDC, the teacher said something that really stuck with me, and he said, like, what's the 200-year plan? This is kind of something that's more pan-Indian now. It's not specifically from Chumash culture, but there's a talk about 7 generations, right? Thinking 7 generations down the line. And I think that ethic has entered permaculture. And like I said, what's your 200-year plan? When you think that way, it really changes the way you approach your approach to what you do.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, yeah, I think I was lucky enough to grow up with still, even though I didn't grow up in a very land-based family, but I was close enough and grew up with, there was just still a lot of sayings around climate, around plants, around mountains, where just to like farmer tips that were really old sayings that in the first you hear it and it's like, that makes no sense at all. And then you learn a bit more and then it's like, oh, it's actually predicting the weather and it's telling me when to plant and what not to plant. And it's so cool and beautiful. And it's such a small insight into what a land-based culture with a land-based language, with a land-based diet, with a land-based lifestyle has, where everything is highly contextual to the ecosystem that you're in, and to what's happening right now, and to how the winter was and how the summer will be, and everything influences the cultural context in each specific bioregion. And in the Alps, I just really saw that because it's such an extreme environment where each valley was also different. And so even though, even after all these years, it was still just obvious every valley had a different dialect, and in the past different seed banks and slightly different clothing, because it was all, because it's not, because it's the land that defines the culture ultimately. And that's where permaculture also can be, that's where permaculture is so exciting. And because not permaculture won't define your practices, it won't define your culture, but it will help you open that door to a deeper relationship with the land, and the land will help you define your culture and all these things. And so yeah, I think that's what's really exciting about it, that it's just one of the helpful tools to get back in those relationships. And it has an ethical reciprocal foundation, which is not what which wasn't part of the cultural food system movement in the last 100 years since industrialization. And so yeah.
So wonderful to hear each of your answer and the way you relate to permaculture, as like knowing that there's just so many ways of relating to this word and this movement and this system. And it's just really inspiring to see the work that each of you do, and what you just like what you offer. Let's see, maybe there's time for another question. Who is someone or people, collectives in the world of land tending that you admire and take inspiration from? Anyone, feel free to start.
Sure, I can start. So recently I've been, had the blessing to go with my brother Cyrus to Oregon, the Siskiyou mountain range there, and visit an elder named Hazel, who has been living and tending a mountain range there for maybe 20 or 30 years. And I was really inspired by how this elder lives very, very simply, and they retain a high level of reverence and knowledge for the place that they live. And every year, once a year, they're kind of like a hermit who once a year offers a social forestry course. And so we went up for that and camped in the cold. And I had to bring all your own things, but this elder just came out with, what their most recent book, Social Forestry, Tending the Land as People of Place. And so I really appreciate how this elder has integrated themselves into the landscape, and their commitment to root down there through the changing through the climatic changes and challenges, both social with their intersocial networks there, the challenges there, as well as the environmental challenges. It's not many people who, are committed to staying in a certain place when you run out of water. And this elder has exemplified that. And they do it with humor and grace and wit. And they're a living embodiment of how, as someone who comes from a settler colonial ancestry, you can really naturalize yourself and live in a good way, where you're tending to land, or the land around you. And Hazel lives in the future. They say they live in the future, and they say it's local. And they upcycle all kinds of materials from the community, from abandoned ganja farms and abandoned projects in the area. It's just very creative infrastructure, making use of what's around them, truly. there's more to say about Hazel, but we have short time. So I encourage you to check them out.
Okay, I'll go. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of incredible work that's being done in the permaculture world now and resilience, design world in refugee settlement context, where permaculture design is incredibly impactful. I'm really excited about that. But generally speaking, what I really look up to also people who kind of do the other side of the coin, where I'm kind of focused on regenerating degraded lands and soils and communities. And I really look up to the people who really sacrifice their lives to protect existing wild areas, be it the oceans or, tropical forests. There's yeah, some of those organizations and some individuals that just spend their whole their sacrifice their lives to protect the species or an area. Yeah, I look up to those people a lot, and it's the other side of the essential coin, that we're working on.
Yeah, I was thinking, and one of the times I felt really inspired. I went out and I visited with I went to a reservation that's right along the Colorado River. So it's split California and Arizona, and the river runs right through it. And it's a land that's really been through it. It was the people there were a lot of them were removed from their homelands, so they were moved out to a reservation that might have been hundreds of miles from where they actually their traditional territory was. And they were dealing with all the effects of that, and then they were pretty much made to engage in kind of conventional agriculture. That was they were told basically you need to become farmers like everybody else is, right, at the time, 100 plus years ago. And then over time, just all sorts of tragedies befell them, where they had everything from the introduction of uh toxic pesticides. They actually had some of the internment camps for the Japanese during World War II. They had fuel dumps from the army, just dumping fuel all over the land there, and dumping it into the groundwater and things like that. They had Agent Orange apparently applied out there. So they had all these problems. And yet the people that I met out there were working on restoring their traditional agriculture, which was mesquite, which was squash, which was all these things, and bringing back the health of the Colorado River out there. And they were working really hard, and it was an uphill battle, but you could see that they had this, this perseverance, and they had this, vision to heal their land, the land that they found themselves on, that they had fallen in love with, that was their home now. And it's really inspirational, and it was the first time I'd ever tasted mesquite when I was out there. It was, I fell in love with that particular food source. And it was just really, like I said, it was really inspirational because of everything they'd been through. They were the ones that were taking charge to heal the land. So I always look to people like that, to implement a vision like that.
I feel so inspired hearing all your inspirations. And um, it would be great if you can drop some of those names in the chat if you have a moment. Yeah, for folks if they want to like learn more. And noting that, yeah, we're almost up for time in this presentation, and Oh, someone's coming in late. Before moving on to our question and answer, just want to also share a little bit about our Quail Springs' upcoming online permaculture design course, which is starting very soon on May 20th. Our online permaculture design course is a 24-week course that offers you the tools to create meaningful change in yourself and your community. And fun fact, Jeffrey is lead instructor in the course, and Wudu is also a contributor to the PDC, and Diego took the PDC with Quail Springs a while back. And another fun, exciting thing that is in the works is as part of the PDC, we're working on creating in-person workshops on agroforestry and food forests, as well as hydrology and watershed restoration in collaboration with Mama Tree. So stay tuned through our newsletter and social media. The PDC is offered at sliding scale pricing as part of the fair share ethics of permaculture. There's also opportunities for scholarships, prioritizing Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The Chumash community can take this course at no cost, and you can go on the online permaculture course page at quailsprings.org/PDC to learn more. And also, just noting that, yeah, the income generated from our courses directly supports Quail Springs' change-making work in research, advocacy, and grassroots community outreach work in the underserved Ojai Valley. So that's my little blurb. I will bring it back to questions if anyone in the audience has any to ask. Opening up the floor for questions now. And also you can just putting it here that our Instagrams and Mama Tree and yeah, the Santa Ynez Environmental, Chumash Environmental Office and Akwaaba Food Forests Instagrams are here. So if you want to add and check out these projects, feel free to. You could turn on your mic if you have questions you want to ask any of the speakers.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay, so my name is Eston Mugala from Malawi. I've been in permaculture for many years, and to me, it's not much a question. I think it's just a comment to share with you all that, you know, like in Africa, we have big problems on subsidy programs where government are trying to subsidize the agriculture sector. And things are not working. We are still destroying the soil because of all the chemicals we're using. I think I've seen many countries, our friends have advanced in doing PDC trainings and trying also to do consultancies and also mentor some communities. I think my experience with Africa, I would love if we can really collaborate and try to also tailor-made our training, our PDC, so that we can be able to help so many communities. Because people in the village who have never gone to school, there are women in the village, there are youth who have left school. Sometimes they don't need the certification. So by doing the international standard 72 hours PDC, you leave a lot of information that can be tailor-made to the needs and the challenge that the community is facing. So I would love if we can really think outside the box, that I think sometimes the PDC for Africa works for those people who have already done maybe a diploma and a degree. They would want just to add a PDC on that. Many people, they do believe in permaculture, that permaculture is the way to go. But sometimes we find that because we are strict to the 72 hour, and the content that is supposed to be trained to the people for them to get certified, we find that we leave so many content that possibly could help alleviate the challenges that people are facing in different countries and with different agroecological zone. So yeah, I think Africa has potential. So many countries that are facing challenges in climate change, environmental degradation, poor soil health, access to water, food insecurity, and in all these challenges that most charity organizations across the globe, they are coming to do projects. You'll find that permaculture would really solve these problems and really have a lot of impact within our society. Because my experience with most organizations, they design what I would call linear project. You have a donor, he's giving the money and they're spending. You have a donor, he's giving the money, they're spending. When you stop, everything stops. And also, like in permaculture, we have possibly 60% of our trainings are hands-on. Those are the kind of what Africa need. We have done so much trainings of PowerPoint presentation in hotels and lodges, but with permaculture, you can really go right away into the village and do the trainings and do hands-on and give specific examples that you're able to see in the community. So I love permaculture. I believe in permaculture, and that's the way to go. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eston. Yeah, we can talk more about that. Either I think I have your email. I can write you an email, but that's already being done. Where permaculture design course is because that's a 2-week luxury that most people can't afford. And so in refugee settlement context and in many contexts, that's already done, where it's now a more participatory course from the beginning, where you train trainers. And part of that is community resource assessments, and it's more participatory 5-day thing for the training of trainers. But then these trainers then go into the actual villages from village to village and take one example that's the most vulnerable as an example where everyone works on, and then it's a 3-day course. And so the most important thing, and so people don't have to take time off or spend money to go anywhere, but trainers come to their village and use one of the houses there as a main example, and then do a 3-day intensive course where everyone's there. And so that's already being done, where the entire PDC content is that's perfect in many contexts, but like you say, it's just not fitting and appropriate for many other contexts. So it's already being done that's changed a lot around to fit to very specific needs and things. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for contributing that.
Yes, and also to add, there is definitely a recognition of certain inaccessibilities with the traditional formats of a permaculture design course. Mainly it's 2 weeks, and take 2 full week time, which many people who are working cannot take off. So part of Quail Springs is move toward accessibility in our online permaculture course, which, unfortunately, it doesn't always apply to every single person, but because of like internet access as well, which we're well aware of, is like it is spread over a course of 24 weeks. That is going at your own pace, so that people can find time to learn. That works with their schedule. And so thank you for really voicing that part aspect of like permaculture and accessibility.
We also have a question in the chat.
Yes, I was just about to read that. So Christina said, I came in late. My apologies if this was spoken to. Could anyone briefly share their perspective on TEK and permaculture, how they do or do not align? I have heard conflicting perspectives from tribal TEK practitioners. I believe in both and am seeking to learn more between these ways and how permaculture is evolving with or separate from TEK.
I would like to answer that if it's all right with everybody. I had actually written down some stuff for this, specifically addressing some of that, because I do have some concerns as well. I am not, there's some people who really, the word permaculture leaves a bad taste in their mouth. I'm not one of those people, but I do have some criticism of perhaps some certain practices I think have some permaculture practitioners have involved themselves in that I think we could do better with. So I don't know if you, Christina, if you were here for my slide presentation, but one of the things is I showed a picture of the saguaros in Arizona burning, and that was because by and large there was an introduced grass that I believe is called buffalo grass that was basically introduced because it lives in it can survive in the desert, and it creates a nice ground cover right now. But what ended up happening is the desert doesn't naturally have a ground cover in Arizona, and so the plants aren't adapted there to fire. And so what ended up is ground cover started becoming invasive and creating basically a way for the fires to spread and burn plants that are not adapted to that. And so, like, for instance, I tried to actually find this picture, and I think they deleted it, which is probably for the best. But the Savory Institute had posted these photos a while back, and it was, or a photo, and it was one of those, they really love doing the side-by-side comparisons where you have a fence line, and this is the property that we do the Savory method on, and this is the property that we're not, that somebody didn't do it on. And on the property that and this was in like Nevada somewhere, and in the property that the Savory Institute was going on, there was all this grass and all this, and in the property where they weren't doing it, it was all desert, right? Well, desert's not bad. Desert's not always bad. Like we talk about desertification as if it's an inherently bad thing, but there are regions of the earth that are desert, and the ecology there, it's full of life. It's just not life like you're going to find in a temperate, region, right? And I think that sometimes people get fixated on certain practices in permaculture and they lose track of the principles, right? So they say, oh, well, we can't leave any bare ground. That's inherently bad. Or, more greenery is necessarily better, right? It's more nutrients. And then that's what happens is they end up, for instance, introducing invasive plants, thinking that, oh, well, this works really well in this climate, so I'll introduce it. And then it becomes a problem for everybody. I know somebody personally who his whole thing that turned him off from permaculture is that permaculturists in his region were singing the praises of introducing invasive plants. And I'm not saying that's across the board, but that's definitely something that rubs a lot of people. I know someone who's a traditional ecological practitioner, another member of my tribe, and she was basically like, look, it's not that I hate, plants or whatever that are from somewhere else. It's that when you introduce an invasive plant, you're actually killing you're reducing the plants that I love. And you're creating a lot of times you're creating a monocrop of this introduced plant, which is against the principles of permaculture. You don't want a monocrop. You want that diversity. So I think that that's one of those places where there is some divergence and, there is conflict. But overall, I do think that, permaculture, permaculture should be drawing from basically these eternal truths, right? Things that is recognizing it's not really, it's not necessarily doing something new. It's trying to reconnect us with the continuity from practices that people all over the world, because, we all are able to recognize the way that, the patterns in nature that are specific to our areas. It draws from those practices, and it should be, if you're doing it right, in my opinion, you should be able to recognize how to adapt it to the specific situation that you're in. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, if I could add to that just briefly, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And I just wanted to mention, like, in going home when I visit my ancestral homeland in Ghana, the traditional ecological knowledge that I learned there, I may not practice that when I come back because it may not be appropriate to this region, right? I might go there, I might enjoy certain plants, certain ceremonies, certain practices, but when I get back, they're not necessarily all applicable. So that's important from the discernment, like where we are and what's actually appropriate, and how is most responsible to relate to the place where we live and steward.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I want to add to that is that I think ideally permaculture helps to keep traditional ecological knowledge alive in a way, if that makes sense. Because the traditional ecological knowledge in many cases, the reason why it's different than, let's say, you need a different, I don't know, Western scientific body of knowledge is because it's alive and it's living, and because it's adapting and it's changing. And it's not something that is just an entity in itself that we accept or we don't accept, but it's something that we need to work with and keep alive. And it's up to each one of us in many ways. And yeah, exactly. The traditional ecological knowledge that I gained in my childhood or in Europe or growing up is not relevant to here. And that would be the same mistake that we've been doing for so long, is thinking, things that work in Europe, or I'm going to superimpose it now somewhere else because it works in cold temperate soils or whatever. But so with permaculture also helping me to let inappropriate ecological knowledge go and see what works and what's necessary here and what's appropriate. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, I was seeing her, she's really investigating this question. I really appreciate that. And I just wanted to say, I get lots of different answers and lots of, I have indigenous relatives from Guatemala, from Lakota relatives, folks from the Hoopa Nation. Like, I've heard a lot of opinions, and we're not all going to agree also. And we just have to find our way and, try to do what we feel is best, while listening and taking feedback continuously.
Thank you so much, Abudu, for that addition. The listening and the feedback feels like so applicable to every aspect of life. Yeah, I think that was a really beautiful question and answer to close this webinar panel. Yeah, I'm just like in so much appreciation for the three of you coming together to share from your perspective, from your experience, and in relation to permaculture. And yeah, just like a lot of food for thought. And yeah, this recording will be uploaded at a later time. So for folks who want to review and listen back, and for those who had to go early or couldn't make it, it will be sent out. And lastly, just want to acknowledge that, what we speak to today is also knowledge and thoughts in the present moment, and that each person's perspectives, as we learn more, our perspectives can shift too. So just like just like really holding the ever-changing nature of these dialogues in mind. Great. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. And yeah, just really great comments in the comment section. And if you are interested to learn more about Quail Springs' work, we encourage you to visit our website, quailsprings.org. Yeah, any last comments from the speakers? Speak now.
Just want to thank everybody who spoke today. I want to thank Quail Springs for bringing us all together and for all the participants. And it's really nice virtually meeting you two, Jeffrey and Abudu. So I've just been so grateful to be here today.
Thank you. Much gratitude to everyone. Thank you, Diego. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Donnie. Quail Springs.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you, meeting you all and chatting. Could go on for hours. There's a lot of things to talk about.
The next one is gonna have to be 2 hours minimum.
Many different, yeah, many directions to go into it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great. Hope everyone have a wonderful Sunday, and yeah, keep in touch. Bye.